Friends, life is a collection of moments, changing moments, where each moment serves a purpose. Do you agree with that? Life is a collection of moments. Each one of those moments put together, they become what we call life. But each one of those moments are varying, are changing moments that influence in what we call life. But each one of those varying, each one of those changing moments actually serve a purpose. They serve a purpose. And we are to understand this because this is exactly what we find the preacher, the wise Solomon, writing about. So I want to invite you to join me as we go through this particular text from the Bible, the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, everything in life, listen with me, friends, everything in life, if everything in life has a purpose, and that is a reality that the preacher is communicating to us, that everything in life has a purpose, then are we including in this everything in life that has a purpose? Are we including in this suffering? Are we including in this pain? Are we including in this cancer? Are we including in this death? Are we saying that divorce has a purpose? Is that what the preacher is suggesting here, friends? Everything in life has a purpose. Then we're talking about cancer, we're talking about diabetes, we're talking about all these tears and suffering and pain. Are we including this on this saying that everything has a purpose? Now, I want to remind you, friends, of our thesis that we have been working around from the beginning of this series to be continued. And our thesis goes like this: that which the enemy designs to break you down, God desires to use it to build you up. Once again, that the enemy has designed or designs to break you down, God desires to use it to build you up. That's our thesis. And if this is correct, then God desires to use that could cause pain to you to build you up. Then we can say, yes, everything in this life has a purpose. Everything has a purpose. And again, friends, you know where I'm coming from. You know why I'm taking the time to talk about this, what I call in some places the doctrine of pain. And you know where I'm coming from, because it's been 18 months. It's been 18 months. It's been 82 weeks. 575 days, friends. 575 days, 1 year, 6 months, and 25 days. And you know what the worst of this is? It's not just that it's past a year and a half for us to wait on my wife to wake up. It's not just that it's a year and a half, past a year and a half, but the fact that we are still counting the days, because this is not coming to an end, and we can't see the end of this story. But you are to tell me, I am to understand that this has a purpose, because everything in life has a purpose. If you see the picture in the background there on the screen, do you know what that is? There was an appointed time that we were working towards for a few years before we got to 2022. And we were preparing for that trip to go to the Holy Land. And the appointed day came. We were in front of this, which is called the Wailing Wall, or also the Western Wall, which is the only wall, the only part of the temple destroyed in AD 70 that still stands up. And we were there, and there was the moment that we came to that particular picture that I have seen thousands of times. Finally, I was in front of that wall. You guys cannot imagine the feeling of being there. The Jews believe that the presence of God is still there. And this is the reason why they come to the wall and bring in these prayers in little pieces of paper, and they put the piece of paper with the prayers in the cracks between the stones. And then they pray. And when they pray, you will see the Orthodox doing this movement. while they're praying. Do you know what I'm talking about? And they do this movement, and the movement is to represent their reverence to the presence of God in this place. And they do this every appointed time. They will go there and do this particular event every time that they have appointed for them to come and do this. I was there, and I decided also to bring my piece of paper. And I remember a few of you mentioned that you wanted me to mention your name when I was there. And I wrote your names down. And I put on those cracks my own prayer. And I had my time to pray also in that place. You friends don't imagine how overwhelming it was to be just in front of that wall. But that point in time, for me to be in front of that wall did come. And the reason why I'm mentioning this, friends, this particular picture of the wall, is because I saw thousands of people, hundreds of people, especially on the Sabbath, coming to that wall. Every appointed day of the week, they will come and celebrate God's goodness in front of that wall. Now, this is sacred for many. It's a holy ground for many. But there is one particular event that takes place every time that simply defines how times work in the mind of human beings. Now, Ecclesiastes chapter 3 is part of the book of Ecclesiastes that I already mentioned, that is part of the 5 books that are known in the Christian world as the books of wisdom. But this particular book is also part of the 5 books that are used to be read during the Jewish festivities. The book of Ecclesiastes in particular was read during the Feast of Tabernacles. They will use this book to tell people how fragile life is. And this is one that can connect to anyone in this modern world. Because if you want to know what life is all about, you just come to this book and you will understand that they were not foreign for what we go through today in 21st century. And so the wise Solomon, which is the one writing this book, we understand and believe, he writes this book now as a contrast to as a contrast of what he just said in the first 2 chapters of the book. As you know, the book of Ecclesiastes has 12 chapters. And you will see that there is a movement in the book that helps us see what he's about. Solomon is about. In the first 4 chapters, he's telling us about his search. He's telling us about what, friends? His search. He's telling us how he's going around looking on cases, just looking at people and how people live, and simply coming to this conclusion. Life is meaningless. Vanity of vanities. Life is meaningless. And again, remember where this is coming from, because Solomon had everything you can imagine. Everything. And from his perspective, having everything, he says, life is meaningless. And then in the middle of this, which is his defense, he's proving this, that is, life is meaningless, that is everything is a vanity. He writes chapter 3. In the middle of this, he tells us the greatest way to see the cycle of life. This is so good, friends, that even in the 60s, many of you were not even born by then, this famous song was written about this particular chapter. And I think the songwriter never gave credit to this, that it came from here. That's how powerful this section is. So I thought to give us some time on reflecting what this chapter says. And so the chapter writes as a break between this life is meaningless to show what life is like in chapter 3. Still with me, friends? Still with me? You like to learn? Are some events, some facts that I'm sharing here new to you? That's great, because we need to grow every single day when we come to the study of the Word of God. And so this, which is a poem speaks with eloquence of the role of time in the life, but not in the life of everyone, especially in the life of the believer. And so he starts saying, before he even mentions the opposites that we will find here in the passage, he starts saying, to everything there is a season. To everything there is a season. The word season in the Hebrew simply means appointed time. It means what, friends? Appointed time. Season here means appointed time. So what then the preacher is saying, the word preacher actually is here in the book of Ecclesiastes. That's how this person that writes the book is identified as the preacher. By the way, that's where the word Ecclesiastes comes from. You know this. The word Ecclesiastes comes from the Greek ecclesia, which means assembly, or anyone? Church. It means church. So this, who is writing this, who is teaching this, who is preaching this, is preaching it to the church. Does it apply to us? Yes or no? It does. It does. So again, he says, to everything there is an appointed time. An appointed time. If everything that happens in my life has an appointed time, then everything that happens in my life is in control of the one that has appointed the time. Are you with me? Keep this in your mind. Keep this in your mind, because we're going to make sense of all this at the end. So he says, to everything there is an appointed time. And then he uses the Hebrew word for time, and he says, a time for every purpose under heaven. So catch this. Whoever the preacher is talking about or attributing this to, he's saying that every event, every moment in life has an appointed time assigned to that event, and also that moment of life has an appointed purpose to the moment. Now, the question that we need to ask, friends, is, who does this, James? Who does the appointing of time? Who does the appointing of purpose? Somebody has to do it, right, friends? But check that the preacher is not saying anything about this yet. He only says, to everything there is a season, appointed time, a time for every purpose under heaven. Now, this word season and time, both words are usually regarded as being a specific point in time rather than a community of time. In other words, listen to this, friends. In other words, that which you are going through at this very moment, those tears, that pain, that suffering, that challenging time, whatever difficulty you're going through, that, friends, according to this, shall come to pass. Because it is temporary. It is temporary. There is an appointed time for that. There is an appointed reason for that. But it comes to an end. It has an expiration date, Elsa. It does. And that, my dear friends, is a good news for us. It's good news for us if you're going through a difficulty, because that shall come to what, everyone? Pass. And that's why the book of Lamentation also says in chapter 3 and verse 37, it says, who is he who speaks and it comes to pass? Who is this that appoints this time to the events, to the moments of life? Who is this that appoints this purpose to the events, to the moments of life? Who is this? The preacher doesn't say anything yet. He doesn't say anything yet. But talking about time and life, James also says in chapter 4, verses 14 and 15, he says, whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? Listen to the description. Very similar to what the preacher in Ecclesiastes is doing. It is even, James says, a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. Listen again, friends, listen. What we're trying to understand is what this life is all about. And there is a special factor that you cannot buy with gold, that you cannot buy with silver, that you cannot buy with bronze. There is a special element in life that you, even if you have all the money of the world, you cannot acquire. That is Time. Time. Time, friends. The Hebrew word for time is a word that defines the beginning, that prescribes the beginning of that time. Not only a portion of a time, but the beginning of that time. And again, purpose. The word purpose in the Hebrew is a word that defines that which we are to delight on. Wait, the preacher is saying that every moment in life has an appointed time, and it also has an appointed purpose, meaning that appointed purpose to the appointed time has a delight in it. The word in the Hebrew for purpose also is translated into delight and also pleasure. You can find this in Isaiah 58 and verse 3, translated into pleasure, the same word. Or Psalm chapter 1 and verse 2 into delight. In other words, this purpose that is assigned by somebody to these moments of life are purposes that are assigned to bring you delight and to bring you joy, pleasure. Are you understanding, friends? So we can conclude so far. We can conclude that if there is a season for everything, listen to me. If there is a season for everything, then there is a reason for everything. If there is a season for everything, Larry, then there is a reason for everything. What is that to me? I need to know what the reason is. Don't you think? But whatever that reason is designed to be a delight and a pleasure for those that believe in the one assigning the purpose and assigning the time. Is this good, friends? I like it because the preacher, the teacher is bringing us some tangible and modern understanding of what this chapter is all about. And so, since to everything there is a season, an appointed time, and to everything there is a purpose or delight under heaven, now here it is. The 14 opposites that we find the writer of Ecclesiastes showing us how to understand life. And look how he starts these 14 opposites. You know what an opposite is, right? Negative, positive, right? One side, the other side, the opposite side. This is what he's going to do for 14 of them, right? For 7 times, he will bring you to the negative, and then he will bring you to the positive. And sometimes he will switch that around for some reason that we'll see soon. He starts with the positive and he ends with the negative. Look how he starts the whole group of opposites. He says, a time to be born and a time to die. Here is a fact, friends, that we all need to understand and we all need to accept. We are all here, have been born, and every one of us will die. Now, listen to this, friends. Every person on earth has had an entrance, and every person on earth will have an exit. But not just that. That entrance and that exit, you have not a say for. You have not a say for entrance or exit in normal conditions. Because I never asked to be born. No one came to me and asked, when do you want to be born? September 2nd, 76, please. No one said to me, do you want to be born in Ecuador? Do you want to be born to these two folks? Do you want to be born in this family? No one asked me. Has any one of you received that invitation or that request? No? So I'm here in this world without my consent. But then in normal conditions, I'm going to die too. And it will not be because I want to die. So my entrance to this world was without my consent. My exit from this world will be without my consent. So this is how the preacher is starting his 14 opposites. He's saying again, you're born, you will die. This is life. This is life under the sun. S-U-N. I want you to catch this, friends, because there is a context that he's defining this in. And the context is under the sun. Under the sun, you will live, you will be born, and you will die. But here is where the additional information comes in. Because there are 13 more opposites that will fill in. Now catch this, friends. You don't have a saying when you come into this world. You don't have a saying when you go out of this world. But between these two, you have all the power to decide. And he says, you ready for this, friends? I don't see you excited. If you don't get excited, I don't get excited. But yeah, these two, birth and death, are naturally the two most important events in a person's life. The most important ones. But then he says, you don't have control over your birth. You don't have control over your death. You do have control over what happens between the two. And he continues saying, a time to plant and a time to plant what is planted. A time to plant, to plant. So check again how he starts saying how you feel out between the two ends of life, the beginning and the end. He simply says, there is a time, and you see the positive to plant and the negative to pluck out. And there is this pluck up is actually unrooting something, is rooting up something. And this simply to understand, friends, that there comes a time when even the finest fruit trees must be cut down. And we need to understand this. That is the cycle of life, that something that was planted needs to be cut down at one point. And I like that Jose used fruits today, because that has to do with what I want to illustrate now, friends. This that he's saying. My mom used to have a big tree. I'm talking about 3-story tree, avocado tree, at her backyard. Huge tree. I don't know how many of you have seen a tree as big as that. How many of you have seen avocados here? You know what avocados are, right? But for you guys, avocados are this big. The avocados that this tree, I'm not lying, I was there, I saw it. The avocados that this tree gave were as big as a melon, like just huge. I'm not exaggerating. It was this big. That tree was, I think my mom loved that tree more than she loved me. It was like her favorite, because every season it'll be packed of avocados and huge, and she will give us avocados in salad, avocados in soup, avocados in smoothie, everything avocado, because there were so many and so big and delicious, so buttery, and she would prepare everything out of that. But avocado trees, as big as those trees, they had lots of leaves. And you know what happened with leaves? They fall. Because it's the cycle of life. They fall. The problem is that houses back in Ecuador are next to each other. Like really close to each other. Houses there are not like big properties like Brother Ken has. No, not like that. These are small houses that are one to each other. And so when the leaves of one tree that was in one backyard fall, guess where they go? To the neighbors. And so my mom's neighbor got so upset, and she will always come after my mom's case and say, you need to cut that tree. You need to cut that tree. And it was like begging her every single day, until one day my mom had to do it. It was the saddest day for my mom that she needed to cut that tree. But there is a moment, friends, she planted, she cultivated, she harvested. It was a delight for her. It was a good time for her when she collected all the avocado, all the fruits. But there was a time that that tree needed to be cut. And it wasn't a happy day, but it did happen. It happened. Because there is a time to plant and there is a time to pluck up. But there is also a time to kill. The preacher is saying a time to kill and also a time to heal. And again, we go from the negative to the positive. This movement, friends, this sudden movement and these oppositions that we find in the movement tells us one specific lesson that we need to have in our minds. And that is that when the negative happens in your life, all that you have to do is get energy, get power, and get hope from the positive that is around the corner. Because in the same way that the negative comes to your life, as sure as that is happening, the positive is assured that it will happen also in your life. And it's around the corner. Because one event follows the other. Because one moment comes after the other. And so, if it is time to kill, then Ecclesiastes also says, there is a time for healing. That's the reality. That's the reality. Now, some of you might say, but to kill? There is a time to kill, so it is all right to kill? Because I have a neighbor that I would like, no. This is not what the Ecclesiastes is saying, friends. This is not what, it's not giving you an okay to kill. This is actually most likely be in reference to imparting justice. Somebody that kills somebody else, and we've seen that in the Old Testament. It can also be referring to a domestic animal that is so sick that it's better to put it to sleep instead of just extending its misery. So that kind of kill, there is time for that. But there is also time to heal. And sometimes the time of healing takes longer than what we expect or desire. And that's just a reality of the cycle of life that we have to understand and we have to accept. It's just part of the economy under the sun that we're living on. Sun, S-U-N. And then he says, a time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. Now, this weeping, another word for that would be mourning, right? And you know that back then, it was a custom for them every time that they mourn to make it public. They will scream really loud. They will make it that so everyone will know that they were in pain. They mourn. They mourn. But here's where the comfort for the believer comes in. Because it was Jesus who said in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 4, he says that blessed are those who mourn. Why? Because they shall be comforted. So here's the importance of understanding that it's part of the cycle, but no, it doesn't come alone. Yes, it hurts. Yes, the pain is not a delight, at least not to me. It's not a delight to suffer. It's not a delight to cry. But there is as sure as that comes to our lives, that moment comes to our life, there is a greater moment that is around the corner, and that is that those tears will be wiped away. So you weep, but around the corner there is a laugh. You will laugh because you are going to be comforted. And so when you laugh after crying, be sure to be as loud as you were when you were crying. Don't be ashamed of laughing, because pain wasn't ashamed of making you suffer. So when that comes to an end, be sure to laugh as loud as you were crying. A time to mourn, a time to dance. And here denotes the idea of jumping around and celebrating. Not going to the discotheque and dancing with, no, jumping and celebrating God. That's what dancing is in the Bible, by the way, for those of you who might be wondering or trying to find an excuse. The Bible doesn't give that excuse, by the way. A time to cast away stones, in a time to gather stones. In life, we come to this life, some of us think at least, that we come to this life to gather. and we work so hard, and we take extra time, and we take a second job because we want to acquire, and we want to get more and more and more, which is okay. That's not the problem. Having things is not the problem. Having means, that's not a problem. Having property is not a problem. There is a bigger problem that the preacher will identify for us. But in the same way, and this is the cycle again that he wants us to understand, in the same way we fight and struggle to acquire things, those things, there is the opposite side. Those things will leave us. In the same that we gather, in the same that we cast, in the same that we gather stones, there will be a time also that we will have to cast them away. And there is a bigger lesson that pretty soon he's going to make clear on that. What's the problem with that? He continues saying a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. And of course, when we think about embrace, we think about accepting somebody, accepting a situation, embrace the situation is a phrase that we always find. But he's not only talking about embracing or hugging something, but he also talks about having your arms in this way. What does this represent? Doing how much? Nothing. So check what the Ecclesiastes is saying to us now. There are times where you can be idle. There are times where you can be quiet. There are times that you can be idle. But even that, those breaks that you need in life have a break. And that is that you are to start producing. You need to stop the break and start doing what you were designed to do. It's all right to take a break. It's all right to go away and take a weekend off. It's all right to take hours of the day off. But in the same way that you go and take a break that way, there is also the importance of breaking that break and going back to work. Now check. He says, a time, he follows saying in verse 6, a time to gain and a time to lose. And in my mind, that goes along with cast away stones or gather stones. It goes along because again, you're talking about gathering. You're talking about getting. You're talking about storing. You're talking about acquiring, bringing in, having more. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what I was saying in the beginning. You know what the real problem is, friends? You know what the real problem is? Is when you based on those things, your stability, your happiness, and your peace. You know what the problem with that is? See, if you put your happiness, your stability, and your peace on things, the cycle doesn't end there, only on gathering the things. The cycle also moves along to say, throw away. Lose. But when you lose those things that you have acquired, guess what? If you base your stability, happiness, and peace on those things, when those things go away from your life, there goes also your stability, your happiness, and your peace. You with me, friends? And that's why the Bible again and again counsels us, don't put your trust on things. But this doesn't only go with things. It goes also with people. It goes with people. Because the moment you put your trust, the moment you put your peace, your happiness, your stability on a person, once the person goes away, what will happen with those things? Everything in your life falls apart. And so the suggestion, the implied suggestion that we find here is that the preacher is saying, instead of putting your trust, your happiness, your stability, your peace on things or a person, put it on somebody else that he hasn't said yet clear. He hasn't mentioned who appoints the time, who appoints the purpose. He hasn't said where to put this happiness, stability, peace on. He hasn't mentioned yet. But one thing is sure, if you put it on temporal things, once those temporal things are removed, or send away, that which you put on goes away alone. So we need to be very careful where our peace is based on, where our happiness is based on, where our stability is based on, where our trust is based on. Very careful. If you put it on temporal things, it'll be also temporary. Time to keep, a time to throw away. Same concept. But it also says a time, in verse 7, a time to tear and a time to sow. And you know why this is mentioned? Because these people, when they were mourning, they would tear apart the clothes. And that's all right. That's how they demonstrated that they were mourning, they were suffering visibly. But he's saying, in the same way that you did this, there is a time that you can put all these ripped pieces together and move on. Friends, this is very difficult. It's very difficult to move on. This could be one of the hardest parts of the cycle of life. Because you have been so dependent to that thing, that job, that property, that thing in general. So the moment that thing is removed, all your hope goes along, and it's very difficult to move on. Very difficult. And it takes time, which is what we're talking about today. And that's why, again, Ecclesiastes says, life is a collection of moments in time. There is an appointed time for those moments. There is an appointed purpose for those moments. Who does this? He continues. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. Now, this is very difficult for some of us that like to speak. Right? If you are a person that always has an answer for everything, if you're a person that always has a solution for everything, you can't hold it. When you hear somebody in trouble, when you hear somebody having an issue, the first thing that you want to do is speak. You want to speak. But there is a time where people that have solutions need to be quiet. But how do I know when to speak and when to be quiet? It seems again to me that there is another external entity that is being interjected, introduced in a very casual way by the writer to tell us there is a power outside you that can tell you when to speak. There is a power outside you that can tell you when to be silent. Who's that? You may ask. And so there is time for us to speak. There is time to keep silence. And we come to the last opposition. The last opposition there, which are two pairs of such. We find number one, a time to love and a time to hate. Now, who are we to love? Who are we to love? There are times that I need to love, but who are we to show this gift that we receive of loving? Well, the answer to that question, I suggest, is found in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 44 again. And this verse says, "But I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you." Love your enemies. There is a time to love them. Is that suggesting also that there is a time to hate them? What do you think? Is the preacher, the teacher, telling us that there is, in the same way that we are called to love them, there is a time that we are called to hate them? I want to suggest, friends, that it goes beyond people. There are times that it's okay to hate the situation, to dislike the pain, the suffering that you may be going through. And so he says there is a time for this, but there is time for this other thing: love, hate, and the opposites. Friends, all that we have seen so far after verse 2 is what we do consciously and we have power over. Everything that happens between my birth and my death, I have a saying over. Because I don't have a saying over my birth, I don't have a saying in normal conditions over my death, but I do have a saying over everything that happens between the two. But when, and here is the implying solution that the writer is telling us. But when I make decisions for everything that happens between the two poles, I have help to do it. And he ends saying this: a time of war in a time of peace. A time of war in a time of peace. See, all the turmoil and conflicts that we live and we experience in this life, friends, these are not permanent events. And we need to understand that at the same time we have to struggle in this life, we also have to celebrate for the victories after the struggle. And we need to know that in the same way we face these difficult moments, there are also solutions for those difficult moments that brings us to the other side. And God is telling us this morning, and the writer is telling us this morning, that whatever you're going through, whatever is bringing you suffering to your heart, to your body, to your mind, to your life, that is temporary, because the opposite is about to come. And he ends saying, negative war, positive peace. Friends, one thing that we need to learn, one thing that we need to understand, is that changes bring challenges. Changes always bring challenges. Because the moment we move from one side to the other, we are actually changing the condition of our lives. But when you're changing from war to peace, remember that change will always bring challenges. How do I face these challenges? How can I overcome the challenges? This is where, for the first time, and thank you for asking this question, because this is the first time that the writer will mention this, just a couple verses down in verse 11, which is out of the passage that we studied, but I wanted to bring it to you. I wanted to bring it to you this morning. It's found in verse 11, just the first section. Listen to what he says, talking about this. The first time that he mentioned in chapter 3, God. He says, God has made everything beautiful in His time. Nobody, we need to understand that which the enemy has thrown at us to destroy us, God wants to use, and He has the power to use it to build us. And I decide whether I allow Him to do it or not. And so the answer to the question that we have had throughout the eight verses is, who appoints this time? It's God. Who appoints the purpose to this appointed time? It's God. Who gives me silence? Who gives me quiet? Who gives me the words to speak? Is God. How can I enjoy the vicissitudes of life with God? The only way, dear church, the only way that I can face the pain that this life will bring, the painful moments that this life will throw at me, the only way that I can overcome is because of the one that already overcame. When did He do it? He did it at the appointed time. At the appointed time. Because Galatians chapter 4 and verse 4 says, listen to this, but when the fullness of the time, appointed time, had come, God sent forth His Son, born of a woman, born under the law. Listen, friends, the only way that I can face this cycle of life, from victory to defeat, from pain to joy, the only way that I can afford this, the only way that I can face this, the only way that I can be an overcomer in front of this condition is when I understand that the same way that these times are appointed for me to come my way, there is the greatest appointment of time, which is the cross, the birth of Jesus, the cross of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus, and the soon coming of the one that can sustain us through all these two poles that we have seen. It is Jesus. It has always been Jesus. And it was an appointed time that this took place. Now, friends, this point doesn't teach that everything has an opportune time according to which one should choose one action or the other. The preacher here teaches that all events are in the hand of God, who makes everything happen the time he judges appropriate. It's when he wants. But you know what? I'm his son. You are his daughter, which means that every purpose that God has assigned to an assigned time has a delight and a pleasure for you. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verses 1 through 8 encourages believers to trust that God is actively involved in the details of their lives and has a purpose behind every event, even those that may seem difficult, painful, or challenging. Life, friends, life is a collection of moments, changing moments, where each moment serves a purpose defined and assigned by our sovereign God. And that is the final thought of all these, friends. There is a God who is orchestrating, not predetermined, but orchestrating everything that happens around in our lives. If I simply submit myself to this God, everything that will happen in my life, even those times that I would like to avoid, will be a blessing and a purpose-driven event that would happen in my life. What time is it? It is time to praise the Lord. It is time to love the Lord. It is time to trust the Lord. It is God's time and your time.